Okay. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to today's webinar, Mission Rights, part of the Design for Impact series. In today's webinar, I will be your moderator, and I am Armando Sierra, Professional Services Operations Manager, and we have a special guest from Mission CISD, John Roger Hill. I will share a little more about Roger, and yes, he goes by John or Roger in just a few moments. As we make our way through the webinar, we have a few objectives to keep in mind. One, we will discover the journey of a curriculum initiative for all. Two, we will learn how the initiative evolved over time. And three, we will explore how data-informed decision-making and helped plan future steps. Excuse me. And now let's take a quick look at the agenda that we'll follow today. We'll discuss why mission rights, we will review multiple iterations, and we will look at what Mission Rights 2.0 looks like. Before I turn it over to Roger, I have a quick question for you. Feel free to type this in the chat on the bottom of your toolbar. What is your preferred weather for this time of year? Especially with fall break and vacations coming up for many of us, what do you prefer? A, cloudy, rainy, cold days. B, sunny and cold. C, sunny and warm. Or D, an extension of summer. If you pick D, you're a very unique person. Me, I think I'm more of a B sort of person. I always run a little warm, so I like that. Also, bonus points for you if you share your favorite activity during the break: family, hiking, playing football, watching football. All right, I see some mixes of B and C. All right. No one has said D yet, so I'm going to commend you all for that. All right, thanks for participating. Okay, we're going to go ahead and continue going. Thank you. Oh, cold, rainy, cold days. Yes, yes, please. Okay. Here to discuss mission rights, we have John Roger Hill. He is a director of curriculum at Mission CISD, a South Texas school district located in the Rio Grande Valley. With over 27 years of experience in education, John has applied his expertise across various roles, including high school English teacher, campus-based curriculum coordinator, dean of instruction, and director of student services. His leadership has been instrumental in developing systems designed to enhance the educational experience for all students. Notably, John has contributed to the creation of key initiatives such as Mission Rights, the district's teacher incentive allotment system, and a variety of data-driven tools aimed at improving student outcomes. And with that, I would like to send it over to Roger to get us started. Roger, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, for being here. It's my pleasure to talk about mission rights. And I'm going to preface this by saying this is truly a journey. We're actually undergoing a revamping of what mission rights is, and we're going to talk about that later in the presentation. But the whole idea is this has grown out of a need. So, as Mr. Sierra already pointed out, Mission CISD is located in deep South Texas, and you see a nice little arrow there. We are right up against the Rio Grande Valley. And from our 2023 TAPER report, we were at 14,493 students. We run pre-K through 12th grade. We have 21 campuses. That includes 14 elementaries, which are all pre-K through 5th, 4 junior highs at 6th through 8th, 2 comprehensive high schools, and we do have 1 wall-to-wall early college high school. You'll notice that our demographics, if you've ever been to the Rio Grande Valley, are not dissimilar from what most of the schools in this area are like. We're almost 87% economically disadvantaged, almost 39% emergent bilingual, 75% or so at risk, and we run almost 12% GT and about little over 10% special education. Please advance. So, what is mission rights? Well, I'm going to give you what it originally is. And I actually was able to pull the original presentations in our training materials because that does a great job of explaining exactly how it began and what it is. So it's a multi-year, multi-stepped, focused plan that will allow students to elevate their writing processes in all disciplines to allow our students to better compete in a global marketplace and achieve post secondary career success. If you were to look at our vision statement right now, a lot of those words mirror what our vision is. The whole idea of this mission writes, yes, does address writing on STAR. 100%. Does it address writing on TSIA? Of course. But that's really not the point. Writing is a skill our students need to be able to compete in the marketplace. Oftentimes, it's your writing that gets you in the door. So we want to make sure all of our students here in Mission have that skill. So through Mission Writes, we focus on writing across the curriculum. It's not just about RLA, it is every curriculum. What does writing look like in a fine arts class, in a Spanish class, in a CTE class where they are working with welding? What does it really look like? So we want writing to be everywhere. And as part of that, we have to have a common vocabulary. It doesn't matter what the subject is. We want to have that because students don't students can't compartmentalize their writing. And here's what I mean by that. If you ever talk to an English teacher, one of the things they always bemoan is that students love to use the way they text in their academic writing. It's because a child doesn't compartmentalize as, oh, I'm texting, I have this type of language. Now I'm writing here. Now I'm writing here. As adults, we can do that, but a lot of our children don't. So we've got to make sure we have that common vocabulary, that common set of practices, so that our students understand what writing is. And then as they get up to 11th, 12th grade, they begin to understand that, hey, writing can change based upon our audience. We also use this to facilitate PLC conversations. We all know about PLCs, we use them, and we know they're great for designing lesson plans. We utilize tons of data in PLC. We are an Eduphoria district, so we use a ton of Eduphoria aware. But really, what you need to also have in PLCs is the student work. You got to look at it like this: when you do a lesson plan, you're planning it out, but ultimately it's what the students produce. And writing is one of those artifacts that's so authentic. A child can't hide their learning in writing. You can see it, it's right in front of you. So we really want to use writing to facilitate those PLC conversations. And we want to provide training for our teachers, regardless of subject. We want to make sure all of our teachers understand what good writing looks like and provide that level of support as a district person through my coordinators so that if a teacher asks, how can I use writing in my subject? We can provide a good answer and support for them to do so. And the last bullet is really where we're at now in mission rights, and really is the idea of instituting a system of goal setting and feedback for teachers and students for that matter. The idea that we have goals that we set for writing, we monitor those goals, we leverage our PLCs, we leverage the data we pull from Eduphoria Aware, we leverage our data we pull from TSIA to really say, okay, how is writing impacting our students in a positive way? Please advance. So let me take you back in time. And when we go back in time in education, there's two things we look at. We look at the turn of the millennium, and then we look at COVID. I mean, that's just basically what it's been in education. So when we go back and look in 2019, this is pre-COVID, so PC. So we knew HB 3906 was on the way. It passed. We understood what it said. And at that time, it was a little bit vague. But one of the most important things that was in there that everyone saw was our STAR tests weren't going to be all multiple choice anymore. Yes, we knew that we had that in the RLA assessments or that you had a split reading and writing test. But what was writing going to look like in those science tests, those social studies tests? Because remember, we hadn't seen the drag and drop questions. We hadn't seen the hotspot questions. All we knew is if you're going to ask a non multiple choice question, writing is probably a way it would go. So we knew we had to figure out a systemic approach to teaching that. Understand, I mentioned that writing is not just about a test. We all understand that. But what HB 3906, it gave us the impetus. It gave us that thing that said, you know what? You need to look at this systemically. You need to look at this with accuracy to make sure our students are achieving this. So whenever the state gives us something like this is an opportunity. And it was an opportunity for us in Mission. So we worked as a committee and we began a plan that would eventually become Mission Rights. And once we had it, we created a common training that was created and delivered across the district. We actually utilized somebody from another district to come and help us with this, and I forget her name. But on the right side, you actually see what the training actually began as. And we decided to use the metaphor of surviving a stampede. So, what was the stampede? Well, we all knew about college readiness. That's a huge buzzword. It's still a huge buzzword today. Technology. Remember, at that time, we all knew technology was big, but eventually that test was going to become a technological test as it has become. Essays. There's the HB 3906. Back then, we were going through a TEKS revision in RLA, so we knew that was on the way. Rigorous standards, and of course, the global market, because our students, when they go out to get good jobs, aren't competing just against people from the Rio Grande Valley. They're competing against people from the world. So this was the plan that we created. Please advance. So I'm going to give you a situation because this was the fun little scenario we created, and let's see what you would have picked. So imagine you're standing in a large field minding your own business when you hear rumbling sounds in the distance. The sounds begin to intensify, and at first you wonder if it's thunder you hear. Because it's a beautiful cloudless day, you dismiss this notion. As the rumbling sound grows louder, you begin to see a dust cloud rising over the ridge just a few yards in front of you. Instantly, you become panicked because at this exact moment, it dawns on you that the rumbling you're hearing is the sound of hundreds of wild bulls stampeding over the ridge. There are hordes of them, and they're bearing down right on top of you. They're clearly faster than you, and there's absolutely no time to escape. What should you do? So, survival experts recommend only one of the following actions. Let's see if you can pick the right one. Please advance. A, lying down and curling up, covering your head with your arms. B, running directly at the bulls, screaming wildly and flailing your arms in an attempt to scare them in another direction. C, turning and running like heck in the same direction the bulls are running, even though you know you can't outrun them. D, standing completely still. They will see you and they'll run around you. And E, screaming bad words at your parents for insisting on a back to nature vacation in Wyoming. Well, everyone, pick it in your head what you think the right answer is, and I will give it to you. The answer is C. You turn and run like heck in the same direction the bulls are running, even though you can't outrun them. And by the way, we know this is true if you've ever seen the running of the bulls. But if we extend the metaphor, the idea is all this is about to hit us. You saw it in the previous slide. It's all going to hit us. We know we can't tackle it all at once, but you run in the right direction and you will survive it and you'll do well. On the right-hand side, it's some dated information. By the way, it was dated when we originally provided this. But I think it being dated actually supported what we were saying. The idea is literacy is not new. We understand this. The first one was more information is produced in the last 30 years, and that was 1989, than the previous 5,000 years combined. Think about 1989. You didn't have full on internet yet. You didn't have Facebook. And even in 1989, it was more. The next one talks about a weekday edition of the New York Times. And that's interesting because we all know that newspapers are struggling to survive. But even then, one weekend's paper had more information than the average person was likely to come across in a lifetime in the 17th century of England. In 1989, information is doubling every 4 years. Think about where we are now and how much information has grown. The blogosphere, which is a term that's not used much anymore, is doubling in the size every 6 months. And it's 60 times larger than it was 3 years ago. And that was in 2006. The iPhones 1s and 2s were floating around in 2006. And the internet is the fastest growing communication media in world history. It took the web 4 years to reach 50 million users. Compare this to the number of years it took radio, which was 38, personal computers 16, and television 13. The idea is that all this information is out there and we need to adapt. And that's why we call it the literacy stampede. Please advance. So, all this information is there. So, after our initial rollout, we asked a simple following question. The best ideas come from asking a question. It's what can Mission CISD do collectively, not one person, not an English class, as a district to improve the fluency and quality of our students' writing, an essential tool for learning concepts and skills in all subjects and disciplines. And that's a good question to ask everywhere. And when we came up with an answer, and this answer has taken years to work on, that's what becomes mission rights. So we definitely had to design something that was going to have an impact. Please advance. So this is our first iteration, and I'm going to talk about iterations because of this evolution. So in 2019, 2020, the idea was we're going to provide writing training to everyone and really focus in on the RLA department. And so once we had the original training, we delivered it as a district. And the way we did it was we took a base training and we give it out to the content coordinators. At Mission, we are extraordinarily lucky. I get to supervise 8 content coordinators, and that is elementary and secondary for each of the 4 content areas. Plus, we have bilingual, we have the advanced academics, we have fine arts, health PE. We have a lot of people who are able to take the training. And even though the training was about 75% the same for everyone, it's that final 25% we customized to make sure we understood what writing is. We also brought in outside trainers and sent our teachers out to Abydos training. And the reason why we had to do that is, especially these early ons, who are people going to go to when they have questions about writing? It's going to be the RLA teachers. So we need to make sure that we built them up well. And the concepts of this training, we embedded them into the curriculum. We had to. If we were going to say this is mission rights, this is a district initiative, we had to make sure it was in the curriculum. And when I say that, it's not in the RLA curriculum exclusively. Even back then, we began to embed it into the other core content areas. And now, if you were to look at our curriculum documents, there's a section on every one of our unit and subunit documents talking about mission rights. And we wanted to make sure we were collecting samples because how else are you going to know how it's working? Well, we physically collected samples from RLA teachers. Remember, 2019, 2020, we hadn't become the masters of learning through Zoom and Teams at that point because we had no reason to. Just like HB 3906 gave us impetus to really focus in on writing, think about it. It was COVID that gave us the impetus to learn a lot more about the technology. So what you're looking at on this page is a one pager, and it was a simple pager. If you'll look on the left-hand side, and it was basically saying this is mission rights on one page. So on the left side is comprehensive literary practices. And I'm not going to read the whole thing to you, but we're really focusing on modeling and instruction. And I'm going to point out a word there. It's that word modeling. You know, it is, you've got to really put yourself out there as a teacher to write in front of your students and to talk about your writing. Because as we well know, because we're all adults who have written, when you write that first sentence or the first 2 sentences, or maybe even the first paragraph, we know that's never going to be the final product. It's never perfect. Heck, I misspell words all over the place when I'm writing my first draft. But you're doing that in front of students, and that's scary. And that's the way it is with any subject, but in particular when you utilize writing. So we really need to focus on the modeling. The other thing I want to point out there is the idea that students are working in groups, they're working in peers. Yes, we want students to be able to write on their own, but they have to have something to write about. We've always said if you can give students a structure, but if they don't have an idea to put in that structure, they're not going to be able to write. You can almost always see it on writing because it ends up being a situation where students are being repetitive. Students are not being repetitive because they want to be repetitive. Students are being repetitive because they know what writing's supposed to be and they don't have something to say. So the idea is writing needs to be the learning for it, the thoughts, that's all vitally important during the instructional portion. Underneath that's guided practice. And again, daily and varied opportunities to apply writing concepts. Writing is not just an essay. It's low stakes, it's high stakes, it's exit tickets. There's tons of ways to write. And then I also talk about grouping there. At the bottom, the independent practice. Again, daily and varied opportunities to apply writing objectives and skills. The different styles of writing. All that's what writing should be. If you look on the right side, if you're an English teacher floating out there, you should recognize the instructional components almost immediately. Organization, progression, development of ideas, and use of language and conventions. That's a heck of a lot like the STAR rubric. And the interesting thing about that rubric, yes, it applies to STAR, but that would actually apply to almost any piece of academic writing, regardless of subject. And so that's why we put it in there. But underneath that, there is a variety of writing purposes. And we wrote this before we knew what the STAR 2.0 writing prompts were like. But if you notice in there, literary analysis, which is basically what the STAR 2.0 writing prompts have become. And in the center, we talk about assessment, the rubric, the analytic, the holistic scoring. All that's important. And how do you do interventions and adjustments? Flexible grouping, monitoring, reteaching, peer grouping, and the most powerful, teacher conferences. As a district, we really stress the ideas of using instructional stations so that you have the opportunity to provide that one-on-one conference time with the students. Elementary picks it up really quick, but we've been really working with our secondary teachers, and we put that in the curriculum as well. Please advance. So, all right, we had a plan, right? And I'm going to use one of my favorite lines of all time. It's from Mike Tyson. And Mike Tyson once said, everyone has a plan to get punched in the face. Well, as we well know, March 2020, we got punched in the face. Students were sent home and our district converted to online instruction. This happened all across the state. So all that wonderful plan, yeah, it wasn't going to work the same. But what we decided as a district, we were going to continue with mission rights. We were just going to have to figure out a way to make it work. So just so you're aware, here at Mission CISD, most of our students stayed in online instruction until the spring of 2021. In other words, we kept our kids off our campuses longer than some others because if you looked at our community and you looked at how COVID was spreading, we were a hot spot and we were always a hot spot. So it was high concern. So even when the students started to come back in spring of 2021, if you can envision it, yes, you had students in the classroom, you had a teacher in the classroom, but the teacher was still basically delivering online instruction just because the kids were in the classroom. And even through the 2021-2022 school year, we were still practicing social distancing. So it still wasn't a normal year. I've referenced on that one pager, writing, you want to talk with people, you want to create those ideas. And unfortunately, what were we going to do, right? So as part of that, remember how samples were collected physically? We said, all right, how are we going to collect them in this online world? Well, we figured out a way utilizing a Google form to collect writing samples. But then what I did, I have a knack for writing spreadsheets. I wrote a highly modified spreadsheet. So our campuses in our district could keep an eye on the submission process to make sure mission rights was still occurring, even when we were online. So I'll show you those pages right now. Please advance. If you'll notice on the left-hand side, this was a page that our executive directors, myself, anybody at central office, we could keep an eye on the totals to make sure our teachers were submitting writing samples. And on the right side, this is what Escobar Rios Elementary saw. We covered up the teacher names, but you could keep track of who's actually been submitting what was there. And you've got to ignore the days left in the current window at negative 45,594. That's a formula. So it's pulling some interesting information. So we were able to monitor it. In other words, just because we went into COVID didn't mean mission rights went away. We just had to figure out a different way. If you would please advance. So we're into the third iteration, right? So here's where we're at. We had a plan, we did the training, COVID hit, and now we're collecting the samples digitally. As a matter of fact, by this time, mission rights had become a culture. Now, you can always tell it's a culture because I was in charge of making sure that the submissions were occurring. And if I didn't post or give a reminder when the submission date was coming up, I had teachers reaching out to me. Hey, where is it? Where is it? We're a Teams district, so technically every teacher in the district has my phone number. So it's expected. Now, what we did do was we reduced the number of windows because we knew writing was happening. So I didn't need it 3 per reporting period, but we reduced it to 2. But what happened was we said, all right, we've got the samples. We need to better assess the level of writing because we're looking at the samples in isolation. So we needed a way to utilize those samples and say, okay, we need something to grab onto, something data, so we can begin to say, all right, this is what the samples are actually saying. So when teachers submitted now on, they had to answer some questions. And again, this was very fast. So it wasn't something like the teacher had to spend hours doing this. This could be done quickly. We needed the name of the student. All right. So think of data. I can look at their writing sample and say, and then I can go into Eduphoria Aware, pull that student, see what they scored in STAR. So I can say, is this writing representative of what they've done in the past? So we have that information. And any writing that student has submitted along the way, we have access. What's the grade level? Well, the reason why we needed grade level was we can now compare writing samples from kinder, first, second, third. So in our district, we can see in a very tangible way what writing looked like. And that's by subject because they had to write the subject area now. And one of the big words that we used is low stakes versus high stakes. What does low stakes writing look like? What is high stakes? I mean, we can all say it, but to actually see it became something different. And one of the big question was, what was the level of achievement for this writing sample? What did we mean by that? Is this a C, a B, an A? Because we have to ask ourselves, what do we consider good writing? Because I mentioned it just a moment ago, we need to bring in samples to the PLC to utilize the student samples. And with these questions, we can now do that. Now, we ran into a problem, and here's what it was. I programmed something that worked. The Google Sheet could do the job, but when a teacher set their filters to bring in the samples they needed, it would take about 90 seconds to work. And even though 90 seconds doesn't sound like a lot, when you have a 45-minute PLC, 90 seconds is an eternity. So we got lucky. At our district, we hired an additional programmer, and his task is to work primarily with curriculum instruction, and that's what he's done. And so what it did was it created a system that was quick. So not only could the submissions go quick, you could also pull them quickly also. Please advance. So this is what it evolved to now. So if you look on the left, we can still see where the campuses are at, where there's submission. And I believe this was the submission from about 3 weeks ago. And on the right, again, Escobar Rios Elementary, we can see them. And if you want to see the samples, to the right, you'll notice year-to-date upload count. So our first teacher had 3 on this window, but it's had, I think that's 32 or 42. Click on that and you can see all the writing samples for that teacher and what they've been submitting. And that now can be used in PLCs. So that's up and running, but we're not done yet. Please advance. So we are in our final iteration, and you have to follow me as I go where we're going with this. Up until this point, most teachers who worked at a traditional classroom environment submitted samples. I'll even give the definition of it. If you had 4 walls in your room and you could sit your students in rows, that's what we talked about. But we had teachers in non-traditional classroom environments, fine arts, CTE, PE, where it didn't quite look like that. And they weren't necessarily submitting. So the district was like, well, why aren't they submitting? Writing is everywhere. We went back to the original rollout and said, everyone. So now those teachers were submitting writing samples as well. Even our special education teachers in a behavior unit, we are seeing writing samples. Now, we hired a new superintendent, about in June. And our superintendent, what I've discovered about her, she loves to ask questions. And she's not asking questions to paint us in a corner. She's asking questions to coach us up, to improve us, to improve our system. And she posed this question to us: what are we doing with the samples that we collect? Well, we explained, well, we want them to be used in PLC. Everything I've told you thus far. But here's the thing: the intent was to use them in a PLC, but we hadn't created a set of expectations for this. It would be like, and she had a huge point on this: I've given you all these wonderful ingredients to make, oh, this wonderful meal, but I didn't give you a recipe to follow. Now, of course, once you follow the recipe a few times, you don't need the recipe anymore. This is the same case. So all of those questions leads to the end of mission rights and its new evolution into Mission Rights 2.0. Please advance. So what is Mission Rights 2.0? Well, the first thing I'm going to tell you is it's in process. There were literally meetings last week and the week before with wonderful discussions with our campus principals to say, what is writing? And it's been fascinating because the questions they're asking tells us what they have learned really well in our journey through Mission Rights, but it also has given us, these are our areas of opportunity to get better. So we introduced it to campus leadership, and we originally were going to begin it in November 2024. We had to push it back because people had good questions, and it made us think as a district leadership team, and we had to sit there and go, okay, what are we going to make it look like? While the focus of the original Mission Rights was to ensure writing was occurring. Yep, it happened. We have 100% proof that writing is occurring. The focus of Mission Rights 2.0 is a focus on writing feedback to the teacher. And our superintendent also pointed out, why not feedback to the students? You know, students get feedback from a teacher, but it's the same teacher and over again. Now they're getting some feedback, and it won't be every kid or every time, but from somebody they don't know. They might know, I'm getting feedback from that bearded, bald white guy who walks down the hallways. That's me. I'm going to be giving feedback, and that changes the way you write. So what we're in the process of doing is, in this evolution, is we're writing a PLC protocol being developed to have writing discussions in all PLCs. We're giving them the recipe. And we had already introduced how to discuss student work. So we're taking what we had already created and applying it to writing. And we want to make sure all of our principals understand how to use this so that we can make sure that writing is occurring. But more importantly, what is writing showing about instructions? All teachers will be submitting a writing goal sheet during each submission because they need to have a goal. The feedback that goes to teachers will basically be, well, this is the writing I see. Here was your goal. And we want to make the feedback positive. So one of the ideas, and this is not set in stone yet, is to utilize something we use for walkthroughs. And it's the I noticed what if protocol. And it's pretty simple. So the idea for this is that we read the goal sheet, right? We read a student sample and we say, well, I noticed you put this in the goal sheet. I noticed this was in the student sample. Well, what if, and you ask a question. Simple as that. And so what we're looking at is really collecting samples, but doing a lot with them. So with that in mind, we're looking at once a reporting period, but we want it to be really good. Please advance. So what you're seeing here now on the screen is the individual components of what will eventually become Mission Rights 2.0. This is our graphic on the right, and the idea is there are various levels to make writing work. At its pinpoint center, of course, is the student, but the closest one to the student is the teacher. They work closest with them. They have the highest direct impact. So for that to work, they have to have time to review the writing, provide feedback, and provide adequate feedback, not only in the writing itself, but the structure and the content. We go out, second layer, that's campus administrator. They're the ones that provide the collaboration, feedback, and looking at the instructional goals, planning for instruction. They're the ones who can help give the teachers what they need to make writing happen. And then there's us, the district administrator, all the C&I departments. We want to collaborate and review Mission Rights 2.0 submissions and discuss those opportunities for growth. Because remember, just like teachers going to a PLC and they're looking at writing, they're looking at it as campus level. We're looking at it as a district level. we will have an idea of what writing looks like and what we need to do as a district to provide a higher level of support to make sure it's happening. Please advance. So we took the original purpose and we tweaked it a little bit. So Mission Writes is a pre-K through 12 district developed plan to improve student writing by improving the teaching of writing across all disciplines. The plan will increase writing, quantity, quality, and monitor the progress through timely submissions. Mission Writes 2.0 is a focused plan for impacting student achievement in all disciplines. And that's key. It's achievement. Writing is the pathway to achievement. Mission Writes 2.0 will refine systematic monitoring of writing submissions by supporting timely, authentic feedback. The processes and structures implemented will ensure next level readiness for Mission CISD students. And on the right side, here are the campus expectations. Teachers, you're going to submit your writing samples for Mission Writes 2.0 every reporting period. Our teachers are used to that. They've done it a lot. And we tell them they should be from classroom assignments and serve as formative assessments. And our teachers don't have to guess about what to submit. We have mission rights in our unit documents. So all they have to do is say, oh, there's the mission rights, there's the rubrics. They're already there. So once they've been submitted, the teachers will bring samples from their classes to their PLCs. They're going to reflect on the student writing. They're going to provide feedback. Again, identify areas for growth and discuss these with their colleagues. It's discussing student work with your colleagues, which is PLC 101. Teachers will then work with their colleagues to develop scaffolded supports that will be provided for students and create targeted activities that will support the development of the students' writing and content knowledge. Think about T-tests with teachers, the differentiated instruction you have to provide for students. This is a great opportunity to work with your peers to be able to talk with administrators and say, this is how we're differentiating for the individual needs of our students. This process will involve all teachers, regardless of teaching assignments, with campus administration. We love our acronyms in education. That's Instruction Assessment Strategist, IAS. Assistant principals, dean of instruction, and principals providing support and expertise with the district writing structures. And I leave them there, but I'm going to show them to you in a moment, so I'm not going to go over them yet. And who should be involved? Everybody, all teachers, all administrators. That's what the campus will be doing. Please advance. So what are the expectations for the district? All right, we're going to be reviewing samples. And that is from our assistant superintendent, our executive directors, myself. We're all going to be looking at them. We're going to train ourselves so we're nice and coordinated, and we're going to be reading samples. We're going to meet with our counterparts from the other departments, especially our special education bilingual, because we're looking for patterns. And that's key at the district level. What are the patterns we're seeing in writing? Because what can we then do to support campuses? And coordinators are going to collaborate to determine the instructional implications following the reporting period and suggestions on how to navigate these implications in the following reporting period. So we are always pivoting our curriculum. You write it, it's got to have the flexibility going forward. And who's involved? All of us. And you notice it's pretty much everyone's involved with that. Please advance. All right, everyone. Just like I was talking about, now you get to see it. You have the before, during, and after. And what we were actually talking about with the campus is the worst thing could happen is the administrators come in only at the after to talk about writing. No, writing should be talked about before. It should be talked about during. Administrators are there to support our students. And the way we do that is support our teachers. And the same is true for the district. It's before, during, and after what we're doing. Please advance. There it is. This is the sheet I want to show you. By the way, the sheets look a little busy, but it's not very much. This is a fillable sheet that's going to be submitted on each submission process. And it's not crafted in isolation. It's crafted after you have those discussions in PLC. On the left side, you'll see the elementary form. It's your grade level, the reporting period, the text. What was the prompt? Again, we don't want a book. We don't want something where teachers are going to spend an hour working on this. No, it should be quick. It should just be, this should almost be the notes from your PLC conversation. Now, to make it easy, we're going to write down what our previous instructional goals were. Notice that's one line. We don't want a big goal. So what was the previous? Remember, from the previous, we've looked at our samples. We like this glows and the grows. What did we see well from our previous instructional goals? What do we need to improve upon? And then you have your new instructional goals because they need to evolve. Based upon our glows and grows, what are those? And we ask three questions. How and with what activities will some concept skills in the glows be enriched instructionally? Whenever you have glows, if you just say, oh, I've got that, I don't have to worry about it anymore, it's going to go bad. You have to make sure you revisit it. How will some concepts and skills in the grows be addressed instructionally? So what are you doing with intentionality to make sure the grows grow? And what are the activities you're going to use? And again, these are not books. They're just really quick. You'll notice that the secondary and the elementary, there isn't a lot of difference. For convenience sake, we put our writing structures on there. So that's where you have your subtle differences. But again, these get scanned in with them because if I'm providing feedback to a teacher, I need to know what your goals were. Please advance. And here's the acronyms we like to use in writing. On the left-hand side is the short answer responses for RLA, elementary. So it's TRAP. T, did the students tear the prompt apart and identify keywords? And by the way, that's tricky because a lot of those short answer responses are actually asking for two things. And when we look at our data, and I love the Eduphoria report where I can actually see the extended constructed response also, sometimes we can't give the points we want because I can't, they didn't answer the prompt. So we definitely put the T. For the R, did the students restate the prompt in their first sentence? A, did the student answer the question in a complete sentence? And P, did students prove their response? And we actually trained principals yesterday on the short constructed response so they know the expectations. And we admitted to them on STAR, in science, you don't have to answer complete sentences. But you know what? It doesn't hurt them to answer in complete sentences. And if you accept students and just say, don't worry about it, it's science, you don't have to write a complete sentence, well, that's not a good life skill. And that might bleed over to their RLA writing where it does affect them. On the right-hand side, this is the ECR breakdown. So did students tear the prompt apart? Again, similar. Did the students restate the prompt in the first sentence? Did the student answer the question in a complete sentence? Did the student cite evidence to support their response? Did the student explain how their evidence supports their response? And did the student summarize their response? Please advance. And for high school, we like to use the ACE. It shortens it up a little bit. It's for this is the short answer. So did the student answer the question in a complete sentence? Did the student cite to support their responses? Did the student explain the support? So this is what we utilize in our district. Now, I will tell you, we are still evolving Mission Rights 2.0. Mr. Sieta had me turn this in 3 weeks ago just to let you behind the curtain a little bit on these presentations. And in 3 weeks, it's evolved even more as we've worked our way through this. And we're going to have follow-up meetings right when we come back in December so that hopefully we can deploy this starting January. I think our best thing here is we know what we want. We also know we have great talent in our district. And sometimes we need to get people in the room to say, okay, if we are going to get to this goal, what do we need to do to get there and really listen? The best way I can explain how this is going, we're fortunate as a district, we received LASSO grant for math instruction, the math planning for elementary mathematics. And we wrote a framework. And that took a lot of work. The same thing's happening here, except we're also writing the system to support writing in our district. And if you'll advance the slide, please. I believe that's all I have to say. Here's our contact information. I'm director for curriculum. I've also included our secondary and elementary language arts coordinators who do so much of the heavy lifting with this. I'm lucky I get to work with them and learn with them. I used to be an English teacher, so when I talk with them, it's like I'm talking shop. It's great. So that ends my presentation. So if there are any questions, or Mr. Sieta, I will turn it back over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Roger. Big round of applause for you. That's a lot of great information. I feel like there was maybe a theme, if you can confirm, right? A theme of like better together, because there was a lot of components that, especially writing across the curriculum and saying that it's not just the RLA department that is in charge of writing, right? It's everyone together. So can you confirm that theme? Do you think that that theme is clearly evident there?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I think if maybe on the lower right hand side, I should just put the word togetherness just to reinforce it over and over again, because writing is not done in isolation, and planning for writing is not done in isolation. So absolutely, we are working together. And as we brought in new people, I've mentioned our new superintendent, she asks questions, and that changes things and it makes it better. And that's part of the point that I belabored here a little bit, was I wanted to show you how something has grown over time. Because if I just gave you what we're doing now, well, that you've got to see the foundations that we built a while back. And yes, it is teamwork, 100% teamwork.
Well, thank you so much for that. And with that, let me go ahead and start to wrap it up. Roger, thank you so much for this great information about mission rights and how this initiative has helped Mission CISD. If you need additional assistance for other training related topics, please email training@eduphoria.net. And with that, I'd like to thank John Roger Hill from Mission CISD for hosting. On behalf of today's team and all of Eduphoria, we would like to thank you for joining us on today's webinar about Design for Impact, Mission Rights. Have a great day.